This is Mended by the Maker, where we heal at the root. And I am Jenna Duncan, your host. Let's dig deep, have honest conversations, and create space for true holistic healing. Now, on today's episode, I wanted to address a concern that I had personally in my own healing journey. And that question was, if God truly is love, if Jesus truly does love us all, why on earth did I experience what I experienced? Why? Why would he allow that to happen? Now, today we're going to go to the Bible to answer this question. It took a while for me to receive what it is I'm going to share with you. So if you don't receive it at first, I completely understand. But know that this isn't something that I researched and found on my own. I give credit to this book that I read that's called The Hidden Half of the Cross. And in that book, this gentleman shares Jesus's experience of abuse in every single way that you can possibly think of. And so I did some digging, I guess, of my own in the Bible, and realized that it's not that God allowed it to happen. It's that sin has to reach its full maturity in order for us to truly be vindicated, if that makes sense, in order for us to truly understand the magnitude of sin. Now, we're not going to go through the whole Bible history about, Satan and Michael in heaven and them fighting. We're not going to go through all that. We're going to come down to while Christ was on earth. I know for me, when I'm sharing, when I have an experience, if somebody else also has that experience, it's like we can click, we can connect because we have that experience. We're sharing that experience together. So when I understood that Christ himself was also abused, it almost helped me to reconcile that, wow, he can relate to me. He can understand to some degree what I've gone through and what I'm currently going through. So let's dig in. Now, we're going to look in the book of Matthew, and we're looking really I would encourage you to read the story yourself, but we're just going to look at bits and pieces of it. Matthew 26, where it talks about Jesus actually being betrayed by his friend, someone that he actually loves. Now, I'll read it to you. It says, Matthew 26, verse 14, "Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priests and said unto them, What will ye give me, and I will deliver him unto you? And they made an agreement that they would sell him for 30 pieces of silver." That is how I received that. Is when I first shared my own experience of sexual abuse, I wasn't met with, the compassion or the love that some people have been met with. It was more like, it was almost like dismissed, like that didn't really happen. If it did happen, why didn't you do XYZ? Why didn't you tell me this time? If that really happened, why do you still continue to, care about this person? So it was almost like I was blamed for it happening as a child. And so when I read this story about Jesus's own friend, his own familiar friend, this was like his potty, like his roll dog. This was somebody that he was with daily. This was one of his 12, his brethrens. I saw it as my own experience with when I shared it with my own parents and how the reaction I got from them. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this in a way that is to be taken as I'm trying to harm my parents or, dishonor my parents. What I'm saying is this is the reality of my experience, but I also understood that my parents did the best they could with what they had, right? They themselves may have had their own trauma. This could have been something that was re-triggering for them. It could have been something that they just can't believe. They were not prepared to deal with something like this. And they did the best they could with what they had, with what they knew. So I understand that now in my healed state. But at that point, I looked at it like, you betrayed me. You were supposed to be somebody that actually cares about me, and you betrayed me, because here I'm coming to you, saying to you, this is something that's happening. And instead of you, protecting me, you actually throw me out to the wolves. So there's that part. The next thing is, when Jesus was captured, he was left by his friends. And we see that in Matthew 26, verse 56. And it says, then all the disciples forsook him and fled. They all left him. In my own experience, when this happened, I was literally on my own. I was the one that had to leave the home, right? After, I don't want to say the allegation, because it's not an allegation, it's a reality. After I divulged my truth, after I told what happened, I had to leave the home. So I felt like I had no one. I was forsaken. I had no friends. There are people in the church that heard whatever version of the story. I don't know what version they heard. It wasn't mine, because they didn't hear it from me. So whatever version of the story, and then they treated me accordingly. I was scorned. So I left the church. It got so bad that I remember being in the mall with a friend, and this guy, or these guys, because when you're younger, you think you're cute, you go to the mall to look mad. That's literally what we used to do. And so we went to the mall, and this guy approached us. These guys, I should say, approached us, and they were talking to us. And one of the guys said to me, "You're a Christian." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And he said, "Yes, you are." And I kept saying, "No, I'm not." And then he said, and I said, "How do you know?" He's like, "You look like a Christian." And then I started to use profanity. Now, if you know anything about me, I hate profanity. I'm a lover of words. I hate profanity. I don't like hearing it. You will not catch me using it. It's just not me as a person. Even since I was younger, it's not me. And so when I cursed later on, reading the story of Jesus, I realized that Peter, his own friend, did the same thing, but we'll get into that in a second. The point I'm trying to make here is, I was forsaken by the people that were closest to me, just like Jesus was. So he also experienced being forsaken in his time of trauma, right? In his time of needing someone to be there for him. Even if we go back just a little bit, when they were in the Garden of Gethsemane and he asked them to pray with him, they fell asleep. They fell asleep on the job. He came back 3 times and said, "Could you not just stay awake and pray with me?" And he wasn't really asking them to pray with him specifically. He wanted them to pray so that when they got into temptation, they would be able to flee that temptation. He wanted them to strengthen themselves. I digress. So we have his friends betrayed him, and then we have his friends left him. Now, we're going to go a little bit deeper, and now we're going to look at Matthew 27, verse 31. And Matthew 27, from 27 to 31, and it says that the soldiers, I'm not reading it verbatim, but I'll just give you a gist of it. The soldiers of the governor, so the police officers, let's say, who are supposed to serve and protect, so the protectors, they took Jesus in the common hall, they gathered around him, all of them gathered around him, and then they stripped him to his nakedness. And then they put a scarlet robe on him. Then they made a crown of thorns, put it on his head, mocked him, spat on him, hit him in the head with a reed, all of that. After they did all that, they took the robe off of him, they put his own clothes on him, and then they led him away to be crucified. Now, I don't know how I I've never been arrested to the point where I needed to strip down, but I know that for a lot of people, especially people that have been abused, being like physically naked is very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. No matter how torn up your body is, it's very, very uncomfortable. Okay? And so I could just imagine Jesus being there. He didn't do anything wrong, and he's being stripped down to his nakedness. And then they decide what they put on him, how they put it on him, and then they're abusing him physically, hitting him, punching him, spitting on him, making fun of him. He didn't do anything wrong. And again, you on the other side of the screen, you didn't do anything wrong, yet all of this happened to you. Jesus can relate to that. In addition to that, we're going to look at Matthew, again, 27. Now we're going to look at verse 35, because this is where like it hits home for me anyways. And it says, and they crucified him and parted his garments. Parting his garments mean that they would have had to take his garments off of him. Now, back in the day isn't like can't even say like today. If you are being, let's say, hung, right? I don't know if we're still doing that these days, but if you're being hung or even being like going on an electric chair, you're not putting on layers and layers and layers of clothing. You're wearing just the clothing that you have. So they took off his clothing, and back then they had like loincloths, but they didn't have underwear like we have underwear now, right? So they stripped him naked, friends, naked, and hung him on a tree so that everyone that is walking past saw him in his nakedness. Weren't you maybe stripped naked? Was that not also possibly your experience? I'm sharing this because the reality is Jesus did not have to endure all that he endured. I believe that he intentionally allowed all of these things to happen to him so that he can look you in the eye. He can look me in the eye and say, I understand. I get it. Because he does. Your mom may not get it. Your dad may not get it. Your sister may not get it. Your best friend may not get it. Your husband, your wife may not get it. But Jesus gets it. He understands. He experienced it. And I know somebody out there is saying, oh, well, he didn't receive penetration. Penetration isn't necessarily what constitutes abuse. Some people have been abused and there was no penetration. Friends, I want you to know that yes, sin has to reach its rightful age, for lack of better words. It has to. I don't want to say, I hate when people say, or I used to say, that God was in the room when all of this was happening. The Bible tells us that in the face of evil, God has to cover his face. He cannot see that. And he doesn't cover his face in the way we see it, right? He covers his face and he's not looking, he can't see, so the devil can do whatever he wants. It's not like that. But he covers his face and he does not see evil. God cannot. Think about it like this. The Bible tells us that in the presence of God, the devil has to flee. So if the devil has worked on this other human being to abuse you because it's a sinful act that this person is doing, the devil has worked on this human being to abuse you, and God shows up in that room, the devil has to leave. He has to. Period. He cannot be in his evil cannot be in the presence of God. Period. Right? So when we think about saying things like, oh, God was in the room when this happened, I don't fully believe that. I don't know how to explain it. I honestly don't. But I trust God's word that if he says all things will work together for my good, it will work together for my good. And I'm seeing it even now, because here I am on this side, and I'm a voice for those who cannot be a voice for themselves. I am speaking up for those who cannot speak up for themselves. I am sharing my experience of healing because I know God wants to heal you. He wants to heal you. He desires to heal you. And if I didn't go through that experience, I could sit here and talk about it, but the passion wouldn't be the same. The emotion wouldn't be the same. The experience, of course, wouldn't be the same. The work would not be the same. So yes, it happened. It's unfortunate that it happened, but that does not mean that God isn't love. That's not what it means at all. It means that He can use this to glorify Him and to allow you to shine bright. Period. Right. So I hope that that was a blessing for you. Again, the scriptures that I read, or the chapters that I read, are in Matthew. You can also find them in Mark, John. I believe it's in Luke as well, but don't quote me. But it's Matthew 26. I suggest you read the whole chapter. And Matthew 27. I suggest you read the whole chapter. And know that God truly desires to heal you. He does. And Jesus can relate to what you've been through. There's so many different aspects of this, like with abuse, but I'm only focusing on the sexual abuse because that is really the main part of Mended by the Maker, but it goes straight across the board for all abuse. You can find your abuse story in Jesus. And as He asked in time past, He's asking you today, wilt thou be made whole?